start off by taking your fabric and folding it in half, right sides together. Then you're going to take your nose wire and you're going to place it right in that fold. Make sure that your wire is pushed right to the top. And now we're going to go and sew a 1/4 inch seam, making sure the wire is pushed right up to the top. Locking it in place at the end. Now that you're done sewing the wire in place, you're going to want to make sure that it's centered in the mask, approximately 2 inches from the edge. When sewing your stitch, be sure that you don't hit it with your needle. Lock it in place. Now it's time to pin the elastic in place. Open up your fabric and place the first elastic as close as you can to the seam that you just made. Close it. Keep a little piece sticking out and pin it in place. Now that you've pinned the first one in place, open up your fabric and make sure, it's very important, that your elastic stays flat so that it does not twist. Bring it to the bottom corner, approximately 1/2 inch from the bottom, and then you're going to place the top piece of fabric on top and then pin. Now you're going to repeat this step on the other side. So you're going to notice that the elastic is a little short in comparison to your fabric and it bunches up a little bit. But you see here in the light, when you sew your seam, the elastic isn't actually in the way. Again, you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. Be sure to go back and forth over the elastic to be sure that it's locked in place. A little tip, if your needle is going this way, you're not likely to break your needle when sewing over it. Be sure to stop and backstitch. And we're gonna leave an opening here. So just lift your foot and move down a little bit. Put your foot back down, lock stitch, and then continue sewing the bottom of the mask. So before you're going to reverse your fabric to have the inside out, you're going to want to clip the corners, making sure not to clip your stitch that you just did. This will allow a nicer, cleaner corner without too much bulk. At the same time, you can trim your threads. So now it's time to reverse your square where you left the opening. You're just going to push the fabric through and use your hands and your thumb to push the corners. Now you can use something sharp but not too pointy where it's going to poke through the fabric. I like to use a pair of scissors that aren't too sharp, or even better if you have a large gauge knitting needle, you could just push the corners out to make them nice and clean. So now it's time to iron, and you're going to want to open up your seams as much as possible to keep them nice and straight. So just a little bit of fiddling with your nails and your fingers, and then you're going to use your iron to press them. Before I press the plates, I'm going to ask you to take the sample out of the bag that I've given you. We're going to be doing 3 pleats, and you'll notice how they're relatively evenly spaced. This will make it a little bit easier for when you do the top stitching, and it's very important that the completed mask is approximately 3.5 inches. So start with the nose wire at the top, and then grab your fabric and make approximately a 1 inch fold. At the beginning, you might find it a little difficult to get the right measurements, but don't worry, after you've done a few, you'll get the hang of it and the feel of it. Once you get to the end, this is when I'd suggest that you take out your measuring tape and just be sure that you're within approximately 3.5 inches. And then maybe just take a quick look from the side to be sure that your pleats are somewhat even. So before you do all of your top stitching, you can always just take your sample and place it on top and see if it's within about that range of 3.5 inches. You're going to want to make sure that your pleats aren't on top of one another like this. It's going to be too thick and it just won't be the right fit. Now when you do the top stitching, it's not necessary to do it at the top here since it was only a fold and there's no edge that could unravel during the wash. It also will be an easy indicator that that's where the nose piece is. So in top stitching, I would recommend approximately 1/4 inch from the edge. I know some of you may have a hard time with this because the thickness of the fabric, so if you really need to, you can move over a little bit more. Ideally, no more than 3/8 inch. In my case, I can do it nice and close with my machine, so I'm gonna go 1/4 inch. At the beginning, you're gonna wanna back up and lock that stitch in place. And this is when you're actually going to be going over that little piece of elastic that you left hanging out earlier. I do a little back stitch also on the pleat, just to give it a little bit of extra reinforcement. Turn it around. And in this case, you're going to want to go nice and close to the edge. The fabric isn't as thick, so you should have no troubles. And by going close to the edge, you'll be sure to close that opening that we had earlier. So the masks are double layer, 100% cotton, so keep in mind that if you put them in the dryer, they will shrink. This batch of masks that we're making has a wire piece for a much better contour fit around the nose.